Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Jefferson Land Trust Conservation Breakfast. I want to welcome each and every one of you, and I especially want to welcome those of you who are new to the Land Trust. We hope you have an enjoyable time and also get to learn more about what we do here. And I also want to ensure that you have a good experience. This is a great program and one that we're excited to present. So without further ado, I want to introduce Sarah Spaeth.
Good morning, everyone. I am so excited for this program. I feel like it's been a long time in the making. I'm the Director of Conservation and Strategic Partnerships here at Jefferson Land Trust. And as we begin our program, we would like to honor and acknowledge that the lands that we work in to preserve are within the indigenous tribal lands of the S'Klallam, Chimacum, Twana, Squamish, and other indigenous peoples. These indigenous peoples are the original stewards of these lands and waters since time immemorial. Jefferson Land Trust recognizes that European and American colonization irrevocably changed the homeland and ecosystem of the tribes, effectively destroying traditional land access and ways of life. We also recognize that the current system of land ownership and private conservation that we operate within has created and continues to create negative impacts on many marginalized communities. Working in conjunction with local indigenous peoples and marginalized communities, the Jefferson Land Trust will recognize this immeasurable disruption, and we will strive to lessen the negative impacts of our work, creating a future wherein we seek to deepen our partnership together and create positive change. Now, I would like to welcome Dana Ward from the Jamestown S'Klallam Tribal Council to share a blessing for us.
Squatchy, Siam Nischayacha, Dana Ward and Snas Tiklam Nutsklayatsum. So, hello, friends. I am Dana Ward of the Jamestown Tribe. And so, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Rick, and your team. On behalf of the Jamestown S'Klallam Tribe and our sister tribes and our tribal council, thank you for the invite today to join you all. It's always a pleasure to participate with you in all of your events. And we enjoy partnering with you, and it's an honor. And so I also want to say that a year ago, Dylan Berkman, the wildlife program manager at the Point No Point Treaty Council, provided a presentation to the Jamestown S'Klallam Tribal Council on the Olympic Cougar project. And it was fascinating to see that research and everything that went into that collaborative effort that, we're tracking, monitoring, and studying the cougars that live in our Olympic Peninsula region. And I know that the project entails much more than that in a larger area, but I'm looking forward to listening in today with you all throughout the presentation. So I'm going to begin the blessing, and I would ask that you each participate in your own way. I have my little rattle here. Hodnenson, Hodnenson, Hodnenson. Our great Creator, thank you for this beautiful day that you've provided for us. We are grateful for the rain that you've provided these past days, and we are ever so appreciative of this beautiful sunshine that you've provided today that warms us all. It's as if all of creation shouts its praise for the beauty of it all. Today, we give you thanks for the many friends that are gathered in this place today for this event. They are friends that we as a tribe know well. Friends who share a common thread, the desire to be good stewards of our lands, of our waterways, and the creatures, both great and small, that live upon and within these sacred places. We are grateful for those who have given generously of their time, their talents, and their resources to make today's event successful in every way. It takes many, many hands to work together for the good of all in these projects. And Creator, as we participate today, Would you inspire each of us and give us insight as to what we can do independently and together to be good caretakers of all of creation? The birds in the sky, the animals that walk the land, the fish and the sea creatures who live within the water, all are a gift to mankind. Help us to be mindful of our responsibility to maintain, preserve, and honor all of our sacred resources. We ask your continued blessing upon all the work of our friends at the Jefferson Land Trust and their many partners and cohorts who work alongside them. Bless those who have diligently worked today to present this important project for all of us. We give you thanks for each one that's taken the time out of their day to join in and come alongside of us to hear this good presentation today. We ask all of these things, Creator, in your great and mighty name. Hottenson. Thank you so much for allowing me to provide a blessing today.
Thank you so much, Dana. I really appreciate the tone that you've set for this day and for our lives, really. And we just so appreciate our partnership with the tribes and our deepening relationship with you on this landscape. Thanks.
Yes. We do equally as well. Thank you.
Well, we have a really fun and intriguing program for you here today. And we want to start first by honoring a local person with the Fairbank Award for Youth Environmental Leadership. And then Dr. Mark Elbroch and Andy Stratton from Panthera will share a presentation on the cougars on the Olympic Peninsula, followed by a Q&A, and then we'll hear from some other friends along the way. To start us off, I'd like to introduce our board president, Brian Rogers. Brian.
Welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with you to celebrate conservation in our community. On behalf of the board and staff of the Land Trust, I'd like to thank the local businesses and organizations that make events like this possible through their sponsorship. Rainier, Bar Car Mobile Bar, Kristen Manwaring Insurance, Marrowstone Vineyards, the Resort at Port Ludlow, the James D. Scheinfeld Family Foundation, the Business Guides, the Food Co-op, and Carl's Building Supply. I hope you'll join me in thanking and supporting these local businesses that help our community thrive. And now it's my very great pleasure to announce and introduce the winner of the Fairbank Award for Youth Environmental Action. This award was created last year to honor the extraordinary service of Owen and Sarah Fairbank, volunteers who've given more than 20 years of service to the Land Trust. We're fortunate to live in a place that's full of amazing young activists, ready to act in order to do what's needed for our planet and our community. I'd like to thank those who submitted nominations and share the dedication and leadership being shown every day by these young people. It was a difficult decision, but today I'm pleased to present the Fairbank Award for Youth Environmental Leadership to Tallulah Sebastian, co-president of Port Townsend High School's Students for Sustainability. According to Tallulah's educator and mentor, Laura Tecker, Tallulah has done an incredible job of making Students for Sustainability a club of inclusivity, active engagement, and positive reinforcement. With her leadership, Students for Sustainability has thrived. Tallulah has led students to Olympia to lobby for the REWRAP Act, a groundbreaking bill that will hold packaging companies responsible for eliminating plastic waste. She's worked with Local 2020 to make Car Free Day a countywide event, and with other students to help pass an idling ban in Port Townsend. She has coordinated club members to support the Northwest Watershed Institute in several of their tree planting activities, and has helped organize a cleanup of Katai Lagoon Park. She's currently working extra hard to raise funds to attend the High School Expedition Club's trip to Thailand this summer, which offers an opportunity to see, live, and be part of another culture. She will live in a Thai village, teaching English, helping with planting crops, and providing childcare. Tallulah, on behalf of the Jefferson Land Trust, I'm pleased to present you with the Fairbank Award for Youth Environmental Action and the accompanying prize of $500. And I have some surprise news to share. A donor who heard about your work was really excited to match the prize, bringing the total to $1,000. Congratulations. I hope this award provides the support you need to continue on your path as a change agent for our planet. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, I would. Thank you so much, Mr. Rogers. Last year, I remember Students for Sustainability was mentioned or nominated for this award, I think, and we didn't win, but we had a small prize. We had like t-shirts delivered and a thank you card from Jefferson Land Trust, and I was just over the moon excited about that prize because it felt really good to be recognized, and I was just happy for like 3 days straight. And so this happening, getting this prize is so insane to me, and I am so grateful for Laura Tucker, who's been an incredible mentor for the past 3 years. She has so much knowledge and connections throughout the community that I have benefited from, and I'm hoping to keep learning more. I'm hoping to, after graduation, go into environmental restoration, protection, possibly politics. I'm not sure about that, but I know that she's going to be a really great person to get information from. And I also want to thank all my people in my club, my co-president, Sawyer Duvall, who's just an incredible person overall. He does so many things through the community, and he's a fantastic partner. And also want to thank you guys. You've provided me with so many opportunities to keep doing the work that I find really gives me a purpose in life. So thank you to all of you as well.
Well, thank you, Tallulah. I know you have to hop off the call now because we've pulled you out of your statistics class, but thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
And now it's my great pleasure to turn the spotlight back to Sarah, who will introduce our keynote speakers.
Thanks, Brian. I am personally very excited to welcome Dr. Mark Elbroch and Andy Stratton here today to share information about the Olympic Cougar Project. I know Mark and Andy from my passion of wildlife tracking. Mark is the director of Panthera's Puma program, Puma being one of the 80 common names for the animal that we know as cougar or mountain lion in this region. Mark has contributed to mountain lion research and conservation in multiple states and in South America, and has received many awards for his work. Mark also learned a senior tracker certificate in South Africa after following lions around varied terrain, and is responsible for having brought the international track and sign certification process to North America. Mark has mentored many, including me, in the art and science of reading the hidden world of wildlife sign on the landscape, providing both field training and 10 seminal and award-winning books on animal behavior, track and sign identification of mammals and birds, animal skull identification, and others, including the one most relevant to today's discussion, the Cougar conundrum, sharing the world with a successful predator. So timely today. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it yet. We will be giving away a signed copy of the Cougar Conundrum at the end of today's event, and the winner will be chosen at random, so you've got to stick around and be present to win. Mark is joined by Olympic Cougar Project Senior Field Technician Andy Stratton, whose fascinating personal accounts of tracking pumas can be found on the Panthera social media accounts. Andy is a really talented teacher and can climb a tree like a cougar. He's an amazing field biologist, and I've really enjoyed getting to know Andy through track and sign and trailing evaluations. Mark and Andy are going to share information about their work to understand the cougar population here on the Olympic Peninsula. As you'll hear, it's also about identifying bottlenecks and obstacles within wildlife corridors. It's really this nexus that can inform the habitat preservations of Jefferson Land Trust that we hope will benefit wildlife for generations to come. Thank you, Mark and Andy, so much for joining us today. We'll follow and open our chat function following their program for your questions. So take it away, Andy and Mark.
Well, thank you so much for the warm welcome. Special thanks to Dana Ward. I really appreciate starting the program that way. And yeah, just thanks for being here and supporting the program. And we'll be talking more about our collaboration with the tribes as well. Andy, you want to say anything quick?
No, I'm glad that we can be here and talk about what we do every day. A big reason what we do is that we can share it. So it's exciting that we have this opportunity.
All right, well, we're going to jump in. If someone could just stick a thumbs up if they can see that. All right, we have confirmation. So we're going to dive in. We don't have a lot of time with you guys. It's just such a shame. This project has got so many moving parts that we are, rather than describe one or two things in depth, we're going to completely overwhelm you with little bits of lots of things. But please follow up with us. We live here. We are part of your community, and we can engage with you at any time you like. I will mention just briefly, we have a much longer program in person in Belfair on May 19th, and you guys will be welcome. I think we'll have a lot more members of the team there, not just from Panthera, but also from some of our project partners. So please join us there as well. So without further ado, we're going to do a bit of back and forth, but I'm going to jump in first and get us going. Boop. Those who have seen me present expect by now to see a video at the start. It's just a wonderful way to kind of focus us on the animal that we're talking about and to make sure that we're all talking about the same animal. As Sarah mentioned, they have lots and lots of common names. We've actually begun a project collecting them. We're now over 250 common names for the species across their range. There are so many more as we build partnerships with more tribes and indigenous peoples across the Americas to kind of learn what they have historically called the species and still call them in many regards. So it's super exciting, and we'll share more about that as we compile the list fully. But mountain lions are, much like house cats, I like to tell people, except that they can kill prey up to 10 times their size. So, but if you have a house cat or your neighbor does, you probably have learned a little bit about the species. Why do we have a project on the Olympic Peninsula? Well, that's a really great question. And I would just highlight really quickly that cats here are unique and they face some significant conservation challenges. So, in particular, what this graphic is showing you is its genetic connectivity. And you'll see that there's this dark blue that kind of runs down the I-5 corridor from Olympia down to Oregon. And you can see it on both sides. The one on the left is representing the sort of genetic diversity and connectedness of all cats in the population, whereas the one on the right is just males. And males in particular are really disconnected across the I-5 corridor. So what that means is that cats on the peninsula are isolated. They have the least genetic diversity of any cougar population in the Pacific Northwest. They have the highest inbreeding coefficients of any cougar population in the Pacific Northwest. And it is so high that it is beyond the threshold that we may actually begin to see genetic changes that make them more likely to get diseases and other sort of issues that might influence their ability to survive in the wild. So these are really big, alarming things to share. But even beyond that, in many ways, they're the canaries in the coal mine, because they are allowing us to address wildlife connectivity for many species. And what I would emphasize even more importantly is that by increasing connectivity across this landscape, we're ensuring a healthy Olympic Peninsula long into the future and healthy human communities living on the Olympic Peninsula. So this is, part of the reason why we're here. You'll hear about some of their other challenges as we go, so I won't continue there. So first and foremost, the Olympic project is a massive collaboration. It's got a lot of people involved. We are not run by any one organization. It is a true collaboration with many, many actors from different interests. Some of us, have overlapping conservation goals. Others have diverging interests because we each want to kind of learn something different from the project. But all together, we call ourselves the Olympic Cougar Project. It includes the Lower Elbroch S'Klallam tribe. It includes the Jamestown S'Klallam. It includes the Port Gamble S'Klallam tribes. It includes the Point No Point Treaty Council, the Skokomish tribe, the Quinault Indian Nation, and the Makah tribe. It includes the Department of Transportation on our connectivity work across I-5, 8, and 12 in the southern parts of the peninsula. It includes the Earth Ranger, which is the Vulcan. Well, can't remember which way they went. They switched from, I think, Vulcan to the Paul Allen Institute now, but they support us through tremendous amount of software development and incredible technical support. It includes graduate students at the University of Montana and the University of Idaho. And these are just the easy partnerships to talk about, but it really is a collaboration. I just want to emphasize that. We, want to acknowledge just quickly that this work is super expensive. And so we have received a tremendous amount of support from a lot of folks. On the tribal side, the two main funders have been the Administration for Native Americans and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Tribal Wildlife Grant sort of series. And actually, I think now 4 different tribes on the peninsula have received grants that support the Olympic Cougar Project in some capacity. On the sort of private side, the Ayers Wildcat Conservation Fund, the Fat Cat Feline Fund have been our largest supporters, National Geographic Society, and lots of individuals. And this work is ongoing. And if you too would like to support us and the project at large, please reach out. We are always in need of more support. And just very quickly, we depend on lots and lots of people and organizations to conduct the work on the ground. And we just want to quickly acknowledge lots of people who are providing us access to their lands, a lot of the private timber industry, especially around here, because of just the dominant presence they have in this particular landscape. It's really important that they support us, and we really appreciate the ability to work on their lands. Just to introduce our project quickly, and I will emphasize that, as I said earlier, every partner has a different reason to want to participate in the Olympic Cougar Project. And so this is sort of Panthera's perspective on it. And what we'll be talking about is sharing some of our opinions, which may differ from some of our partners. But for us, the 3 focuses of the Olympic Cougar Project are, number 1, connectivity, which I already briefly mentioned, and I'll talk a lot more about. Number 2 is capacity building. And so that's the development of tools that can be used for cougar conservation everywhere. It's the development of partnerships and really investing in local communities and hopefully building platforms to elevate local people to be the long-term stewards of these landscapes far into the future. And in particular, that's really about working with local tribes and providing them sort of science support and building tools if they request them of us, but also investing in the actual tribal people here on the peninsula to become those future leaders and conservationists. And so we do that through funding people in the tribes that are part of the project, and by funding graduate students who are tribal members, also, sort of developing their next set of skills. And we're continuing to sort of invest in different ways and building those relationships much more strongly. And last is coexistence, which I won't talk about because we'll talk more about it in the presentation. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Andy.
Hello, everybody. I want to talk about the root of our work on the ground. and really how we're able to collect all of this data so that we can start analyses in the future to answer the questions that we are asking. The key part of this really is putting collars on cougars out on the Olympic Peninsula. This is a very intensive field-oriented work, and it requires everybody on the project. Across all of our partnerships, we've captured 127 different individuals since 2018. This is just a subset of the population, but it really gives us insight into how they're using the landscape and how they disperse once youngsters reach age that they're leaving their mothers. The method that we use mostly on the peninsula for doing this is we use trained scent hounds. We have Greg and Russell Jones. We also have Matt Cox, Tyler with the, I believe, Jamestown S'Klallam tribe. And I myself have dogs as well. And we all work together to locate where cougars have been in the last few hours. Snow is particularly helpful for this, so wintertime is a great time for us. And the dogs do their work. We really could not do this project without them. They are kind of, in some ways, the heroes of cougar conservation here. Once the cougars climb a tree, because the dogs have barked and chased them up there, we dart them with a dart rifle, and they either jump out or we climb and lower the cougar down. Once this happens, we're able to do our real work, which is collecting samples on, we take whiskers so that we can understand diet. We take genetic samples so that we can understand diversity and relatedness between the different individuals. We fit them with a collar, which you can see here. It has a drop-off mechanism that should work after 2 years. And they send locations for us to Earth Ranger every 2 hours. We also take measurements. So this allows us to collect data on the size and different morphology of the cougars in this specific location. And here you can see different photos. We have a young cougar here on the far left of the screen. You can see the canines that are brand new and white. You can see we pay special attention to taking temperatures and monitoring vitals and taking measurements as well on the right. This, I'm going to fast forward a little bit, but I wanted to talk about the drug that we're using here. It allows us to reverse the anesthesia after we are done with the workup. It is called BAM. And here you can see the cougar just wakes right up. It's kind of wondering what happened. Sometimes I compare us to being alien abductors in a way. And they're wondering what's going on, but they are quickly able to go off on their own. You can see she immediately runs away. With this, we're able to, With this, we're able to visit sites that these cougars have spent time. And this allows us to do things like set cameras on their kills and understand more about their behavior here on the Olympic Peninsula. I'm not going to talk a lot about this because we just don't have time for it, but this is a large amount of our work. We have many people on the field that go out every day to visit these sites and see what these cougars are doing. This right here is an individual shearing an elk so that it can get to the meat. The next part of our field work that we've been really focusing on is going to dens so we can understand survival. Right here you can see a cougar kitten and my coworker Caitlin Coupar taking some samples. We use Earth Ranger to identify den sites because cougars will stay there for 2 weeks and then start leaving and returning to these sites, which is not normal behavior. We then go to them, and at this point we've visited 26 different dens and we've documented 77 kittens. And some of the things we want to know are where these dens are on the landscape, how are they selecting this habitat that they are going to give birth in. We want to know how many kittens they're having, And then once we're there and we find these kittens, we take samples. We can use genetics from kittens who may not make it to adulthood to understand how cougars are related on the landscape. And then that leads us to the next part, which is survivorship. So we're able to follow them as they grow up. And ideally, once they reach about 12 months of age, we will collar them, and then we will see where they go once they leave their mothers. All right, and I'm going to hand it back to Mark to talk about dispersal.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so just sort of following along the narrative so far is that we do put out a lot of GPS collars, and with the goal of studying what these cats are doing, where they're going. And one of the benefits is that we are able to discover these, basically the places that are secret to cougars. And their dens, of course, are probably the most secret locations for cougars. So we go in and we are able to see where the kittens are and to follow them. And as Andy mentioned, our goal is to actually see them grow up all the way and to disperse. And the dispersal is, what that means is it's when a kitten leaves its mother. And so they set off on their own, and there's a journey to seek a territory of their own, and that's called dispersal. And some people call those animals, while they're moving, dispersers. Some call them transients because they don't have a home yet, and they're just sort of navigating the landscape in sort of random, or well, not really random, but unexpected ways, I think is fair to say, until they select a territory of their own. And so I'm just going to show you an animation. This was a cat whose name was Al. And if you see that yellow up in this area, you can just see this is his dispersal. And so he crosses some pretty major roads. He runs into Olympia, but he manages to cross, it's at 12 or it's 8 there, and gets into the Capitol Forest. And then he runs into, so urban sprawl again. The red and the orange and the yellow are the most human infrastructure. He manages to get across 12 then, and then he bounces down through all that great land and all the way down to the Columbia River. And then he, runs in again. He tries the I-5 corridor again, gets rebuffed again, tries to cross the I-5, gets rebuffed again, tries again, gets rebuffed. And then I stopped the animation there, but what he ends up doing is he circles back up to kind of heading home, if you will, where he was killed by a hunter before he even reached it. So that kind of, to me, tells you the story of the Olympic cougars perfectly, is that they are, they're essentially trapped, on this peninsula. And so their movements are really unusual. So what do we do to address connectivity? Well, we've done a lot of things. So the first, I just want to acknowledge the work of the Washington Wildlife Habitat Connectivity Working Group, which is a big consortium of people that we play a role in as well. And we built sort of connectivity models based on these 6 species. And so we were pulled in as experts on cougars, and we used expert opinion. Basically, we had these crazy long questionnaires, like things like, so how many lanes of highway would a cougar cross before it wants to turn back? How wide would a railroadway track be? Could it be 3 trains or 4 trains before they're rebuffed? And we were just sort of doing the best we could to decide what we knew about these species. And what we did with that is we created, lots and lots of maps. I'm going to kind of skip ahead, but these blue lines that you see crossing the highways are cougar specific. So these are the places that our expert-based model identified as the likely places where connectivity is best on the landscape. May not be perfect. Crossing I-5 anywhere is tough, but it's the best we've got. And so these are the areas that we could begin to target for conservation intervention. So the other thing that we have, though, of course, is all this location data, actual location data of cats wearing GPS collars. And so Reed Barbie is the young gentleman in the corner, and the older gentleman is Hugh Robinson. Both were with Panthera. And so for Reed's masters, we had him begin to map some pretty cool stuff. So what this crazy colorful map does is it tells you the probability of cats using any place on the landscape west of the Cascades based on the movements that we have in these GPS colors. So we have something like 350,000, well, now more, but for this analysis, about 350,000 GPS locations of where cats used the landscape. And we have lots of areas where they never used the landscape. And so based on those things, we can predict where they would likely move beyond our study area. And so the I-5 corridor is this sort of black line running down from, the dip of the Seattle blackness, and then to Tacoma, and then to Olympia. And so we could say, look, there's actually two places across I-5 where it looks like cats still have some connectivity. And so we were able to take that and say, does it match up with our expert-based stuff? And look at that, absolutely perfectly matches what's called the northern linkage, which is the one closest to Olympia, and the one that we collectively call the southern linkage, which is the one closest to Oregon and Portland. And those are the two priorities right now for the state of Washington. And so Panthera and our partners are all part of the I-5 Connectivity Working Group and the statewide Connectivity Action Plan Working Group, contributing data to sort of support how we identify the best places to begin to consider building wildlife bridges and underpasses. And in fact, the feasibility study for I-5 is so far along that we've begun to identify places where we could potentially build a bridge or an underpass. So even more exciting, across all of this time, we did in fact have a cat successfully cross I-5. His name was Floki. And Floki did it at 3 a.m. on a Sunday night, well, really Monday morning, I guess, in COVID. So a lot less traffic at the least traffic time. And he crossed I-5 successfully and is now established down in southern Washington, a new range. And so we looked at that position, and this is where he did it. There's a basalt road cut at mile 96, and it is what the geologists may be most enthused about in the entire northern linkage, because it's already got the foundations for a wildlife overpass already in place. You just have to connect them. And so they were like, wow, this is the perfect spot. And lo and behold, that the spot is that red dot on the map on the left. I put the yellow arrow there to draw your attention to it. That is the location, this basalt road cut. And 2 years ago, a black bear died on the highway at that place. So it was already on everyone's radar. And then boom, where does Floki cross? Exactly right there. So even more evidence that this is not only geologically a great spot to build a bridge, but that the wildlife really wanted to be there. Super exciting. I'm going to switch topics really quickly. Again, I told you we're going to bombard you a bit. One of the big things that we're doing is trying to count cats on the Olympic Peninsula. No one's ever done it before. And much of that work has been led locally by Cameron Messias, who's a member of the Lower Elbroch S'Klallam tribe. It's someone that Panthera supports at the University of Idaho. And she's working with scat detection dogs and other methods to kind of compare the best way to determine the abundance of cougars, mountain lions, in a particular place on the landscape. So those are all the folks involved. She focused on what's called the Pisht GMU, which is a part of the peninsula, the north side, if you recognize it. And so within the territory that outlined in red, we wanted to determine the abundance of cougars in multiple ways to see which worked best. And so I won't dwell too long. I'll just get to the point. These are fresh off the press from Cameron, sent them to me yesterday or the day before. And so she's looking at two methods that use genetics extracted from poop. So the dogs go out, they find cougar poop, we pull out the genetics, and we can basically start to look at individuals. This is Bob's poop, and this is Diane's poop, and oh, look, Bob appears over here and over here as well. And using some cool math, we're able to kind of come up with the abundance in that area. And that's called the seeker, which is a spatial capture recapture, that's SCR. So based on the SCR, we say that there's about 1.5 independent cats. That means transients, youngsters looking for a territory, and residents, but not kittens. So excluding all the kittens, there's about 1.5 per 100 square kilometers. And we're trying to use that metric because it's the comparison with the state of Washington. The average for the state of Washington is 2.2, based on work done entirely east of I-5. So based on that, we are below the average in the PIST, and that actually works out perfectly with what we're seeing on the ground. We used that to calibrate these black squares. We just wanted to see where it matched best, which is, you'll see number 3, and then we can use that in a camera-based model. We have over 550 cameras around the peninsula. This square right here is where we did the comparison to calibrate our camera model to come up with abundance. So we know that was 1.5. Then we use the different sort of quantitative metrics and apply it to the camera grid around. These are super rough. We haven't done this as a unified analysis yet, but we're seeing variation on the peninsula. That the Macaw Reservation, for existence, and just a little bit south of there, that they've got 3.5 compared to 1.5. That the area sort of run by the Point No Point team, which is sort of the quill scene, and then going down into the flat lowlands across the peninsula that way to the floating bridge, it has about 0.9. And so that's not unexpected, because you expect that, in the foothills and by quill scene, you probably have a higher density, and then you're going to see it drop off as you get out into the more human-dominated landscapes to the east. We haven't done anything for the Skokomish area yet, but we will very soon. And then the Quinault Reservation coming in at about 2.7 and the other at the 3.5. And this is exactly what we've seen, like in terms of our captures and our effort and kind of where we're seeing cats, that there are a heck of a lot more cats in the south than there are in the north. And one of the exciting things that's in front of us is to figure out why. And we hope to have some answers for that soon. This is part of the excitement of the work itself. Death and conflict, I'm going to switch topics again really quickly. The collars are invasive, and I know it worries a lot of folks when we're handling animals in research methods, but the one data that I would emphasize that it provides us that we really can't get any other way is we determine the cause of death for these animals. And by looking at their cause of death, we can build a conservation strategy that actually mitigates those causes of death. And so our leading cause of death is legal state removal. So after they are involved in conflict, usually killing a goat, a sheep, an alpaca in someone's yard, the state comes in and removes those animals. Out of the 46 mortalities, we've had 15 that were removed by the state. Legal hunting has removed 11. Other human causes, which include poaching. Poaching here is a real thing. And vehicle strikes are another 8. And all 3 of those combined means that 74% of the cats that have died while wearing a GPS collar have been killed by people. We also see disease, and that's some of the disease sampling that we're talking about. We use swabs at captures and even with kittens to kind of see things. We have very low kitten survival on the peninsula. We have not figured out why, but many of them are dying well before dispersal age. And just a little stat at the bottom there is that, half of the cats that have died while wearing a GPS collar are 1 to 3 years old. And that's of concern, because when it's younger cats that are dying, you start to look at the patterns of, is lethal removal or legal hunting driving sort of this machine that may be creating opportunity for a greater number of youngsters on the landscape, and youngsters getting into trouble and therefore running into depredation scenarios where they're being killed. And that's a question that's still out there. We don't necessarily have the answer, but we're definitely seeing evidence that young cats are getting into trouble more often than older cats. The last thing I'll leave you with is this, in terms of conflict, is we've begun to start saying, well, why is it occurring? And the first question is, where is it occurring? And when is it occurring? So based on all of the kill data that we have, so we visit all those clusters. We didn't really talk about their prey selection, but we have, how many, Andy, now?
Oh, Thousands, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, so thousands of prey that have been killed by cougars around the peninsula. We can again build these sort of probability surfaces where we say these are the places where it's yellowest, where they're most likely to hunt prey. And we can do it by season. So you can see it changes a little bit through the year. So in fall, the yellowest areas are different than they are in winter. And that's true of summer as well, and spring as well. And the little red X's, if you can see them, or little crosses, are places where cats were involved in a depredation incident, meaning they killed an alpaca, sheep, or goat, or a dog. Dogs are rare, actually. Those really, it's about domestic livestock. And on the peninsula in that season, over the last, I can't remember how many years we used to pull this together, but this is a lot of years of data to get enough numbers to map it out. And we wanted to see whether where cats are hunting natural prey or where they're running into these domestic prey, and that might be part of the reason why it's occurring. And I'll just show you again. It's really interesting to see that all of these red squares in spring are really well placed in all the yellowest places. And so it speaks to the ecology of the animal, where cats are looking for food, being a big piece of why they're running into issues in these areas. And they shift where they look at different seasons. And so that's going to be helpful in kind of coming up with some solutions. I'm going to hand it back to Andy to talk a little bit about coexistence.
All right, so after talking about all that conflict and working on the ground with the public, it's something that I have seen personally and interacting with folks that are landowners on the Olympic Peninsula. I've talked a lot with people about. And there's a lot of questions when it comes to how can we live our lives alongside these cats. Here's a photo of a cougar. It's either a cougar named Monkey or Ellie. They were two siblings whose mother died right when they were ready to disperse. And unfortunately, she left them in somebody's backyard as she went off and succumbed to a disease. So they didn't really know what they were doing at first, and we had an opportunity here. We worked with a landowner to set cameras, and you can see that they are very curious about this well-built livestock enclosure. And this is an example where we had conflict and some livestock killed. So to talk about that and how we can minimize that as humans, that can really do something about how we keep our livestock living in a landscape as we do that abuts wilderness. The main things that we can do, I would recommend, is taking brush away from your fence line. The more cover that cougars have to get close to your livestock, the closer they will get. They are ambush hunters, and they are what we call cryptic. So they love to not be seen. So if you can take that away from them, they may not get as close. The next thing you can do is to build a tall fence. And despite the cost, this is probably the best way. You want to bury a fence 2 feet below the ground. Just briefly, this is a graphic by the Washington Fish and Wildlife. And this is their recommendation that we back. You want a 6-foot tall fence with a 2-foot overhang. And ideally, you would have a live wire at the top or some kind of barbed wire to deter the cougar from grabbing on and climbing over. The next thing that you would want to do, and this is really key, is to put livestock away at night. You want to bring them out during the daylight, and dawn and dusk, have them put away within an enclosure that has a roof on it. So a barn, you can see an example here, which has fencing all the way around it and a nice roof on top. The next thing that you can do is to have a livestock guard dog. We are doing some work on the other side of the world in southern Patagonia, which is in Chile. We are testing how well livestock guard dogs work when it comes to large sheep ranches. And just anecdotally, they do seem to deter cougars among other predators. They are always with your flock. They are very attentive and they are happy to be outside. I personally have one, and it is hard to get her inside at night. She would prefer to be outside. The next thing that a lot of folks ask us about is recreation and just being outside and enjoying our landscape. Cougars are something that they're not very common on the landscape compared to things like deer. So I would say in a distance situation, if you saw a cougar, you're very lucky to have seen a cougar. They are hard to see, and I find it exciting when I catch a glimpse of them. If you encounter a cougar that is not acting as we feel it should, it's acting interested in you or curious, some things that you can do are not run away. That is key. You want to stand tall and you want to make loud noises. If it continues to approach you, throwing rocks or other objects at it really tends to work to scare it off. Some of the main causes of conflict in these situations that we have seen on the peninsula and elsewhere are dogs. And that's not to say that it increases the likelihood that you're going to run into a cougar. But if you did run into a cougar, having an off-leash dog increases the chances of you having a negative encounter. The dog barks, and then there's antagonization going there, among other things. So I would recommend leashing your dogs. I would also like to point out that since I've lived here, the attacks that I have known about in Washington have involved either mountain bikers or children. And what you want to do when you're in the woods is to keep track of your children. If you see a cougar, bring them close. Don't let them run around. And just be aware, if you're a mountain biker, that you are a fast-moving object. And cats, like your house cat, if something flings by it, they show interest in that. So that's just something to be aware of, not to deter people from recreating in that way. But avoid doing things like mountain biking or running in the dusk or dawn and at night would be what I would say. And this leads us to how we address this. Sorry. Outreach and just talking to people on the landscape is key to educating folks about both our project, like we're doing here, and how we can live with these animals. Understanding an animal is key to wanting to live with that animal and to wanting to know and understand how we can best do that on the landscape. Here you can see myself and Matt Mahan at a capture with some local children around the Port Townsend area, helping us weigh a cougar that we have captured and are putting a collar on. I'm going to hand it back to Mark.
I think just to follow up a little bit on what Andy said, we're almost done here. For those who are watching clocks, is that I'll just share personally. I've been lucky enough to work in some really beautiful remote areas, and this is really the first project that I've been involved in where cats are in people's backyards every day, and so it's a really different landscape here, and it has different conservation issues. And so the focus of our work up until now has been, or up until recently, much more about wildlife connectivity. We've gathered, I think, a huge data set now to be able to address those questions and to support the building of bridges and underpasses across I-5 and other local highways. So that's super exciting. And we're at a pivotal moment where we're transitioning. And now we want to focus on coexistence more, like testing the different fences. We have multiple projects under Panthera's banner where we test in other sites, one in California where we're testing turbofladry, which is another kind of fencing thing to protect livestock. And we're testing fox lights. In Patagonia, we're testing guardian dogs and a custom light sound device. And here we're going to begin testing several things as well as we're working on sort of, the policy angle and other incentive programs that support local people in building roofs over and infrastructure to protect animals. hopefully seeing grant programs developed by the state of Washington to support those people that live in these areas. There's lots of solutions. So that's kind of our pivot right now, is to focus on that kind of coexistence strategies rather than connectivity moving forward. I'm just going to wrap up really fast now. And I like to just emphasize one really important thing is that cougars are amazingly connected species, disproportionately important to ecosystems. This is from a quick review we did of just science literature, which is just the tip of the iceberg. But we found that cougars have real relationships with 485 different kinds of animals and plants. And we had 543 different kinds of relationships with these animals and plants. And that's just an amazing diversity of relationships that they have with the ecosystems in which they live. And the thing that I would just really emphasize and hope you can take away is that, you know, through these various relationships they have with these lots of species, they are in fact supporting healthy ecosystems that are connected and supporting us, those of us who live in these ecosystems. And so, said another way, you know, humans need healthy environments, and wildcats like cougars actually increase ecological resilience, support biodiversity, and create healthier habitats. And again, just to hammer it home, if you live in close proximity to cougars, I think we live in healthier ecosystems. So I personally am grateful that me and my children live in a landscape with local animals. That is the end. We covered a ton of material. I know there's going to be a great Q&A and a little panel with Sarah. So why don't I just stop there and turn it back to you, Sarah?
Thanks so much, Mark and Andy. That's so fascinating. And I just found really interesting the seasonal data that you've collected around prey species and where they're going during the seasons. That's really interesting. We're collecting questions from the whole participants, and I have a couple of questions to get us started, actually. And really want to ask you about how we can continue to support this work. You know, Jefferson Land Trust is really a proud ally in this endeavor, and we're using our tools and expertise to establish habitat preserves and wildlife corridors where cougars and other native species can navigate and forage and thrive without undue interference. And as you've mentioned, these corridors are not really for the sole benefit of cougars. They're for habitat for a whole variety of wildlife species to navigate and live alongside humans, and fostering really a more balanced and sustainable landscape for us all. How do you see us, Jefferson Land Trust, furthering this project and supporting your work even more?
That's a great question. I would say I'll respond to how can Jefferson and the public support us and this work. And it's really about, as you said, not just supporting wildlife, but supporting local people and really envisioning a human and wildlife integrated, healthy ecosystem on the peninsula. And so how can you support the work? We'll say the work not being just our work, but the work of sort of promoting health on the Olympic Peninsula. I would say, use the tools available. We're hoping to develop more and more tools for you in terms of being strategic in land purchases, ones that make more sense for wildlife, that do the best things to connect landscapes. Connectivity can't be overemphasized. It really is the best thing we can do for many of these species in terms and for their long-term health, but also our long-term health. And I think it's becoming more and more apparent. And so being really strategic and starting to think in terms of partnerships. None of our organizations should be acting in isolation. We need to be acting as a much larger entity so we can build networks. and networks of land and connect things across the landscape. And then, you know, promoting coexistence is going to be important because a lot of our landscapes we have so much private lands. It's a matrix, right? So yes, the land trust can come in and be strategic in purchasing certain parcels. There's other protected lands out there owned by the state, by the federal government, et cetera, et cetera. But how do we get connectivity across private lands? That's really about changing people's minds and their mindsets and how they coexist, and to have that coexistence in their head, how they take care of their animals, the behaviors they have around their houses. That all impacts how wildlife have access to their lands and whether they use it or not. Because we really are aiming towards a coexistence model where we are living with wildlife rather than building fences around our yard so that they have to live outside of us all the time. Because that's the only way forward, is that we've got to share this landscape. How can you directly help? There is a bill currently being reviewed to encourage it would establish an account where the WDFW, so Fish and Wildlife, WashDOT, Department of Transportation, would co-manage an account to fund connectivity infrastructure projects. That's a big one. Please support it. You can support the effort, of course, by supporting local land trusts, which are really champions in securing landscapes to help us build connected landscapes. You can support the effort by supporting the nonprofits that are actually active in promoting all of this stuff. Conservation Northwest in our region is super active in promoting connectivity. And of course, we would appreciate your support as well in all of our work, Panthera, and through the tribes as well. And we spread the money that comes through Panthera to our tribal partners as well. And I mean, there's just lots of ways that you can contribute. There's volunteer opportunities, but it's really about supporting the legislation, the policy work, and educating people just through that social network of people. Just everyone needs to be thinking about coexistence and connected landscapes, and then we're going to be okay.
I'd just like to add that if you live on the peninsula, and it's very unlikely, but if we knock on your door and there was a cougar in your backyard, it'd be great if you came with us into your backyard to see what they were doing.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. I think, we've been really eager for your data with regard to priority landscapes for our proactive efforts. So I really appreciate that. And I just think the takeaway that I just got from what you said is that education, engaging our communities around what it means to coexist is really important. And I think that we can incorporate more of that into our messaging as well. I have some questions from the audience, and I'll just start with, do cougars go into the higher areas of the Olympic Mountains, and are there cameras there? There weren't any population numbers on your map in the Olympic National Park.
Great question. Yes, they do go up there. Yes, they have been recorded on cameras. We do have the Olympic National Park has run its own camera grid and is sharing that data. And actually it was incorporated in, well, we didn't show the map of the camera habitat selection, but that they have been incorporated into that. But that said, the habitat in the Olympic National Park is not as good as that surrounding it. And so, in 167 cats since 2018, we actually have about 160 cats that have worn collars when we include the tribal data that was collected previous to our collaborative work as well. It looks like a donut, cats go through the park and they use especially those deep rivers that cut into the park because that's where the elk are and that's where the deer are, and that's where they can stay year round. But they don't want to be up on Hurricane Ridge right now, waist deep in snow. There's nothing to eat and it's hard to move around. So the park is not the best cougar habitat. And in fact, the better habitat is that outside the park as you go downhill.
Interesting. Yeah. There are a lot of questions coming in. I don't know if we'll be able to cover all of them, but there was a quick question. I think you'll be able to answer it quickly. Does the public have access to the tracking data? Can I follow cougars in my area? And that's a question that's come up for me as I've been interested in ruckus in particular.
Yeah, we can't do that because they are a hunted species. And so there are a lot of regulations around what's called fair chase. And it would give hunters an undue advantage in finding a cougar should they choose to hunt it. And so you can't make public any movement data of hunted species in general.
Great. What have you found about how cougars interact socially? I read that they're more social than previously thought, sharing food sources, etc.
Want me to go, or you want to talk Andy?
Gosh, I can talk some. Mark has done work in previous projects in the Tetons showing that reciprocity is key in cougar sociality. So if one cougar shares with another cougar, they're more likely to share back. That comes to food mostly. It seems cougars live in a loose community in a way. They have overlapping territories. They are territorial and they do live solitarily most of the time, but they communicate through scrape sites. So they're making scratches on the ground with their hind feet and leaving scent to communicate with each other. Sometimes we call it cat book in a way. And they do interact. They run into each other on the landscape, and it will run the gambit of peaceful interactions to hostile interactions, depending on the individuals involved.
Cool. I love seeing some of the footage about that. That's really awesome. People have heard that if a cougar's reported, it's killed because it's out of territory based upon state law. How can this type of report be avoided? Who can be contacted to preserve cougars versus kill them? What's your opinion on how to handle situations like this where livestock or pets are being killed?
So first, reporting a sighting does not mean that someone's going to come kill the cat. I think that would be rare. There are some counties in the state of Washington where that is occurring more frequently. Klickitat could be pointed to, for instance. But in general, I'd say at least where we are, that's not what happens. So if you see a cat, the game agency is probably going to tell you, well, cats live here, and is everything okay? You know, they'll check in with you and they may give you some advice on coexisting with cats. But the first move is not to kill the cougar. So please don't feel that you should be nervous about reporting sightings. But one conflict does occur, meaning like that a cat actually comes into someone's yard or property and either threatens or kills an animal. Then the state does have the authority to make the decision to remove that animal. I think it's fair to say they often do. But not always. And that should you report such an incident and have strong feelings one way or another, you're certainly welcome to share those, and it can influence the decision. It's supposed to be a co-decision with landowners and even neighbors if the cat needs to be caught, because if the way they catch it is often with hounds, and they'll cross other private properties. But the state does have that authority to remove the animal without the agreement of the landowner.
Thanks for that. Another quick question: is bear spray an effective personal deterrent against coming into contact with a cougar?
Yes, indeed.
It will work for any wildlife, pretty much.
Yeah.
Cool. And then I just want to ask one more question personally. I've heard, maybe through you, Andy, that there are cougars that are swimming long distances, like one crossed the Hood Canal. I'm just really curious about that, because that, would lend one to think that maybe they can, that's another corridor that they could potentially use as crossing by water.
Yeah, so that individual was named Lucky. He was captured by Dylan and the Point No Point crew out near Kingston, and he traveled around out there before eventually deciding to swim the Hood Canal. I believe that it was over a mile, wasn't it? His swim, 2.5 kilometers.
1.5 miles.
Yeah, so it was a big deal. It was a big swim, and we had recorded one other swim prior to that which we have written a note on to try to estimate how many islands cougars could swim to in the Puget Sound and the Salish Sea, and it is a lot of them. There are some divides between land that we're not sure they could cross. For example, between Marrowstone Island and Whidbey Island, that would be a massive swim for a cougar. But really, we don't know what the maximum would be for them to swim.
Fascinating. Just such powerful animals. That's incredible. I think we're out of time for more Q&A, although there's still more questions, but really appreciate all of your discussion and information that you shared today. And just want to remind everybody, we have an autographed copy. Oh, where is it? Can't see it. There we go. Cougar Conundrum from Mark to give away to a randomly selected audience member at the end of the program. So please stay tuned. And then also I want to mention that if you're interested in becoming more involved, Cedar Root School is offering a wildlife tracking intensive starting this fall that will be 7 weekends over 8 months, with the curriculum cornerstone being the Olympic Cougar Project. And I am really excited about this. So stay tuned on that and check it out on Cedar Root's website. And you should now, I'd like to invite Executive Director Richard Tucker to join me for a conversation about some of the upcoming projects that we have in the pipeline. And I just want to, for those of you that aren't really familiar with Jefferson Land Trust, we actually over the last 35 years have helped protect about 18,000 acres of land in Jefferson County. And we're just going to talk a little bit about some of those projects that are still in works today. So, Richard.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for the wonderful conversation. I want to thank Dr. Elbroch and Andy for this wonderful insight they've given us on our cougar neighbors. And as Sarah mentioned, we're going to launch into a discussion of some upcoming projects with a little bit of historical perspective and context.
Yeah. So I was hired back in 1996 to coordinate the Quimper Wildlife Corridor. And it's still going on. 33 properties have been protected in the Quimper Wildlife Corridor since the start of our 2021 Quimper Wildlife Corridor Challenge campaign. And now a total of 287 acres is protected in this wildlife corridor that stretches across the North Quimper Peninsula since the project first began in 1989. Currently, we've got 6 properties consisting of an additional 2.97 acres in the immediate pipeline to add to the corridor. And you have to remember, all this land was platted into 50 by 100-foot lots. So it's taken a long time to piece it together, but it's providing connected habitat. And we know that some of our resident cougars have been in there recently. 20 farms and almost 1,500 acres of agricultural land is protected and keeping farmland in production. And this year we have 4 farms and 163 acres of farmland in the conservation pipeline, including North Beaver Valley Farm. And this farm is being purchased with funds from the state's new Buy, Protect, Sell program, which effectively reduces the cost of the land for the next buyer in order to keep it in agricultural production. It will be transferred to its next owner through a public process similar to the one that we piloted with the Kawamoto farm down near Lake Leland a couple of years ago. Since our founding in 1989, 547 acres in the Snow and Salmon Creek watersheds down at the head of Discovery Bay have been protected, and more than 11,280 total acres of wildlife habitat protected. This year, we're working to add another 56.7 acres to the protected habitat lands in those watersheds. And in our stewardship and education programs, we're creating habitat for birds on our preserves and have 31 volunteers analyzing 83,170 hours of birdsong. We're also continuing to expand our education programs with the goal of serving every student in East Jefferson County schools with free field-based environmental education. And it's just so fun to see their eyes light up. And of course, the jewel in our crown in the year ahead will be the transformation of our 950-acre Chimacum Ridge, which we just acquired the big piece of it in December of 2023. And we're transforming it into a community forest. And Richard, I will love for you to share with everyone what's going to happen over this next year.
Thank you. 2024 is going to be a banner year for this land trust. As Sarah mentioned, we closed on the property for Chimacum Ridge, and we're in the process of transforming it into a community forest. And you say, well, what is a community forest? Well, each community forest, each community makes that decision. And we went through several years of stakeholder meetings and analysis trying to find out what we want here in Jefferson County for our community forest. And what it is, it'll be a combination of economic benefits, ecological benefits, and also social benefits, benefiting the community at large. And so it's very exciting as we go through this transformation this year with a view of opening it to the public next year. I want to thank everybody who's contributed to this project. We've had numerous volunteer hours. We've had people donate resources to us. And it's really amazing. And I want to thank our partners, our supporters, because you made this happen. And so thank you for that. And so one thing about the ridge is that it is a wonderful place for wildlife. It'll be a source for local sustainable wood, and also just a great place for students to have an outdoor classroom, so to speak. And as Sarah mentioned, we work in all the public school districts in East Jefferson County, and we even help subsidize the bus transportation so students can get out there and see these wonderful resources. Now that, let's see. As I mentioned, we're working to do it, and also once again, this is a groundbreaking initiative for us. It's the largest project the Land Trust has ever done. And it will be, as Sarah mentioned, a jewel in our crown. And so we want you to stay tuned. There's a lot of information coming this year as we make progress. So we'll be having outreach events. Please participate and learn more about this wonderful project, which is actually available. And it's actually a benefit for the entire Jefferson County community. So once again, thank you for everybody who's involved, and stay tuned. Now I want to answer a question many of you are having is, well, how can I help? What can I do? What's available to me? Well, I want to turn over speaking to Nan Evans. Nan is a longtime Land Trust supporter. She's a former board member. And also she is the host of Nature Now on KPTZ radio. And if you've heard her program, you know how informative it is and how grateful we are to have Nan in our community. And so Nan, take it away.
Thank you, Richard. Before I respond to your question, I want to take just a moment to really express deep, heartfelt appreciation to everyone who has supported the work of the Land Trust over the years. Thank you for your commitment, your knowledge, your ideas, your time, and of course, your money. And we're here today with all these success stories because of all of you. And now, Richard, to answer your question, I want to invite everyone, whether you have supported Jefferson Land Trust work or Land Trust works anywhere, to join me today in generously giving to the Jefferson Land Trust. And I'm actually quite delighted to do this. I chuckle. I have childhood friends who would be surprised that I have this role, because I was known as one of those kids who just couldn't even sell Girl Scout cookies. But I've learned a lot of things as I've gotten older. I learned that if I am passionate about a cause, it's easy to ask others for their support. And I am passionate about land trusts. The land trust system is one of the absolutely most effective ways to ensure ecosystem conservation and community resiliency in perpetuity forever. I've also learned that if the work of an organization inspires me, I really, really enjoy reaching out to others to share that inspiration. And the Jefferson Land Trust is a spectacular organization. Everything that's been talked about here today spotlights the leadership, the vision, the creativity, and the community focus of the Jefferson Land Trust. The list of results is long, just briefly touched on by Sarah and Richard, and the challenge of things that need to be done in the future is huge. I have the utmost faith in the Jefferson Land Trust that it will continue to excel, to use the best conservation science available, to work with partners across a broad scope of interests, and to always listen to the needs of our community. If you find passion in your hearts and minds for the work of the Jefferson Land Trust, and if you're inspired by today's program and the vision for the future, please join me and support generously the work of the Jefferson Land Trust. How to do that? Well, there is a donate here link in the chat section of this Zoom. And then shortly after today's program, you will receive an email. It will include the video of the program and another donate here link. And of course, you can go directly to the Jefferson Land Trust website. That's the best website in the world, saveland.org, saveland.org. If you scroll to the bottom, there's another donate link. So I'm going to thank you in advance for partnering with me and others to support the future of our wonderful Jefferson Land Trust and the community we all live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Nan, for such an inspiring invitation. And thank you all for being here today with us and for supporting our work however you can. Jefferson Land Trust is really proud to be a community-led and community-powered organization, and you prove to us every day with your support that you believe in the work that we do. Thank you. Before we sign off, we have one more very special announcement. The randomly selected winner of the signed copy of Dr. Elbroch's book is Norton Smith. Congratulations, Norton. We will be in touch about getting your gift to you. Back to you, Richard.
All right, thank you. Wait, I'm going to go off script just for a second to thank Sarah Spaeth for bringing this whole issue of sign and tracking to the Land Trust. She is, if you don't know, a renowned wildlife tracker, and we're grateful that she's here with us, and also we're grateful for all her support for what she's done in her 27 years working for the Land Trust, but also bringing us new tools for us to help our conservation efforts. But I want to thank our wonderful speakers. I want to thank our community supporters. And I also want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your morning to sit with us and listen and learn. It's been a really inspiring program. And I just want to say thank you. And we're looking forward to seeing you out on the land with us. And have a good rest of your day.